hearing. This is an issue that has vexed our republic since the very beginning. Jefferson sent American naval and marine forces to the shores of Tripoli, actually closer to Benghazi, to fight pirates who preyed on American ships. And in doing so, he did ask for congressional authorization and got it, but kind of asked for it as an afterthought. So while more recent conflicts are our focus, the founding generation had not worked out the difference between Article 1 and Article 2, the right to declare war versus the right to command our troops. I'm not sure that the Soleimani attack triggered the War Powers Act because it was conducted in an hour rather than the 60 or 90 days. But putting that aside and some other issues aside, we certainly have seen a violation of the War Powers Act, at least in my mind, in Bosnia, Kosovo, and Libya. There are three aspects that we need to focus. The first, I think people have talked about, the AUMFs. 2002 ought to be repealed. 2001 will be more difficult to deal with because we don't have a consensus in Congress as to what our policy should be in Afghanistan. But I'm hoping that we can at least trim the 2001 AUMF to say it doesn't authorize any new wars. Because if you read 2001, it authorizes war just about anywhere where the supporters of Al Qaeda may reside, and that is a lot of different places. The second thing we have to do on the War Powers Act is define hostilities. We have to define President Clinton and President Obama both asserted that we're not entering forces into hostilities when we're just bombing, or in the case of Libya, bombing using drones, or bombing in a way that has a low risk of American casualties. And of course, around the world, we face the issue of whether we're there to do training or whether we're fighting. But the final issue I'd like to focus on is, even with all this, every president since Nixon, since the War Powers Act was passed, and to some degree since Jefferson, have asserted that they have the constitutional right to send our forces anywhere, anytime. Congress is just there to provide the money or not provide the money. I commend our first witness, Ms. Hathaway, for her comment about how important it is that any revised War Powers Act give Congress standing to go into court and enforce it. And finally, I want to commend her for pointing out the importance of using our power of the purse to win this constitutional battle. In 2011, I proposed an amendment to our appropriations bill that said no money can be spent in contravention of the War Powers Act. Since then, I don't think we've had a violation of the War Powers Act, and we've been able to include that amendment in every spending bill. It was a big controversy in 2011. Now we put it in every bill. I want to thank 30 of our colleagues for co-sponsoring a bill to make that permanent law, not having to put it in every appropriations bill. Ms. Hathaway, how useful is it, or is it useful, to use Congress's power of the purse to further underline and buttress our constitutional right to have a War Powers Act?
It's not only useful, it's absolutely essential. This really is fundamentally the power that Congress has. It has the power to cut off the use of funds to wage a war that Congress doesn't support. And the reason that I support an automatic cutoff of the kind that you describe is that if Congress has to separately vote to cut off funding for an ongoing war, that is almost certainly going to be vetoed by the president. So that imposes a supermajority requirement. You have to muster a veto-proof majority in both houses. And that's just fundamentally impossible. We've seen that. And that's not what the Constitution ought to require. What the Constitution makes clear, Congress is the one that ought to be able to make the decisions about this. So having this automatic cutoff is really essential to an effective war powers resolution.
Thank you. I believe my time has expired.